Hi there, I'm Meredith Blackwell. This is Don Pfister, and we're doing interviews for the oral history of Mycology project. We're on the University of Florida campus in Gainesville, Florida, in a hotel at the edge of the campus, the Hilton Hotel. Today is the 13th of July, 2022. So Don, my colleague.
Yes, we're interviewing Julia Kerrigan, and Julia is taking over as the president of the Mycological Society.
About 2 hours ago.
Yeah,
Yes.
Today's the first day of the new reign. So what we do with these, we're interested in your background, where you were born, where you went to school, how you got into fungi, and really kind of general information about your professors and others, so that in the future people will look at these and they'll be able to know something about the time and place.
Okay, well, thank you. That I was born and raised in Newport Beach, California. I had a very privileged life there. Growing up sailing and all sorts of wonderful things. And my parents, the one thing they instilled with me was education. They were kind enough to let me go to school wherever I wanted, which I know is an absolute gift. I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
How did you pick Michigan?
Okay, good question. I did not. I first went to a liberal arts school in Oakland. It was an all-women's college, and I didn't work out at all. My father is from the Chicago area. He went to Northwestern, and so I was looking at Columbia. He didn't. He just was like, "Oh, Michigan would be great." So I just kind of, by his distractions, I think. But yeah, that's a great, because it's a weird place to pick after being California, and there's very few Californians in Michigan at the time. It was in the 80s. So I wasn't in school with many people from my high school or anything. Michigan has an amazing history of mycology. I knew nothing about it, I will admit. And I started out in the biological sciences. I took all the hard classes and then changed to natural resources, because that was really spoke to me. Spent a summer up in the biological station where Nancy Smith Weber and mycologists were, and the funny thing was, I shouldn't tell you this, but I always thought, like, who in the heck spends their time studying mushrooms? Which I shouldn't say this. I was like 23, right?
So who was teaching up there at that point? I had 2 summers up at the biological station.
I took ecology and natural resources, and I'm going to be embarrassed and say I don't remember their names.
That's fine.
But they were that was like such an incredibly impactful summer, in that all I did was work. Like, I've never worked so hard in my life. I didn't know you could study that hard when you're a student, right? Like, because you're like, oh, it's 2 credits, no big deal, or 2 classes, no big deal. All I did was study, and I loved it so much. Yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful spot. You're out on a lake, living in those days when I was there, in cabins.
Oh yeah, it was cabins.
Around, there's a laboratory building, and eating together.
And the summer started out with, like, we literally had built fires because it was so warm, so cold. Yeah. I sprained my ankle for the first time, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's all very hilly, and I couldn't walk for. It was kind of a big deal. I've sprained my ankle ever since. And then, let's see. So then, as part of that, my natural resources degree, I had to take a class called Woody Plants, which was life-changing. And I literally would be out and see all the crazy galls on plants, which I learned very quickly that they were caused by insects. I know that, but I never wanted to be an entomologist. And so that got me interested in in tree diseases and forest pathology. And so when I graduated, I wanted to, I just applied to a bunch of schools where they had degrees in plant pathology and forestry, because I love trees. And I ended up I applied to a bunch of places, ended up at University of Georgia. I did get accepted to Clemson and never, don't tell them that. And the good graces of, their program is amazing in that you don't have to have a major professor. Like for where I am, you have to be on a grant and do a project. And there you just would be accepted, and I was accepted as a master's student. And
Where was this?
At University of Georgia in Athens. Okay. Yes, and so I was accepted to a program on looking at Calotatricum on dogwood anthracnose, or causing dogwood anthracnose. The practice was wonderful. I happened to be there at the same time when Charles Mims is doing amazing work, and I took his mycology class, and it was amazing, and his work was insanely, I just loved electron microscopy. I loved like how you could like focus in and actually see things instead of like statistically proving things, which I know I'm going to get in trouble.
Observation.
But you hadn't done microscopy much.
No, I always, my entire career, I've gone back and forth of like, I love ecology, I love big picture, but I want to see stuff. And part of it's because I'm not comfortable with statistics, and I guess we're getting a little out of track to you. Anyway, I go back and forth, and he was just the most amazing instructor. I probably hung around like labs I shouldn't have been, but I just remember like reading like Mycologias and seeing like this is the coolest thing in the world. And he was kind enough to let me switch projects to be, so he let me be his major professor, and that's where I kind of changed my.
So what did you study with Charles?
I looked at the infection of pecan by, it was at the time called Calotatricum gliosporioides. I don't know what the name is now. But oh my gosh, I have to tell you that being with him as an electron microscopist, and Beth Richardson, who's his technician, she's amazing. And they set the bar so high. I literally sectioned through a spore with a germ tube and a adversarium. And that was like when that's a high bar.
You really hit it.
That's a high bar. I know when Dr. Mims looked at me and shook my hand, I was like, okay, this is cool.
I've done it.
Yeah. Like he was like, okay. But that is so hard. I can't even tell you. Yeah. But it was and I did not appreciate. He was, well, actually, yeah, he's called he was the president of MSA at the time. I didn't understand what that meant. I do now. Yeah, so that really directed my MSA career a lot.
Were those serial sections or no?
Yes, yeah. Oh, TEM.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I can't tell you the months and months and months and months and months I spent doing that. I've never been more proud of. I think. I still need to publish that. Actually, I'm now getting off topic again.
Some projects just keep going.
They cut this, right?
Yeah, they can.
Okay.
But we want the world to know.
Yeah. No, it was
going to publish it.
No, it was amazing. I've never been so proud of. Yeah, it was really. I will say again, Beth Richardson she did most of the SEM, and Charles would always give her credit. Yeah. For that, because she's amazing.
You know, she retired really too early. I couldn't believe she'd retired way before Charles did, huh?
Yeah.
Or somewhat before.
So you're at Georgia, and you finish up something, a project, a thesis, and then what?
And then it was the beginning of the 90s, so I dabbled with molecular work. And then I decided I really like working, I like both, but I really like seeing fungi. So I and still have the tree connection. So I applied to programs, and I was accepted by Dr. Jack Rogers at Washington State University, and then went to work with him for a PhD project. And so that was super open-ended. I worked on it. He had this, Meredith knows, it's a yeast. He's known for working with xylariaceous fungi, but he had this yeast that he'd been growing, that he'd isolated, and he showed it to me, and it grows on nematodes. I was instantly captivated by it, and it's like, that's like my proudest. I've worked for like 5-6 years on that particular organism that's a commensal on nematodes, and I characterized its association. I found the sexual stage of it. So much, and I'm so proud of the work. And I always joke, I think it's been cited like 3 times, and once, it's like twice by me and once by Meredith.
I have actually borrowed that picture twice. It's a beautiful micrograph.
Oh, it's such a
It's
wonderful.
SEM, and
Yeah.
it shows the nematode's mouth and all. And what was the association with the tree?
Okay, great question. So the it's just found where these nematodes, they're free-living nematodes, and they tend to live where there's like slime flux or sugars, where there's enough food for the nematode, and so that's why they're in these these galleries from beetles. You can also, the first isolation was from a slime flux from grapevines, but basically they exist wherever there's sugars and enough sugars for the nematodes to live. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. I've spent
A very intricate association with several things.
I've actually gotten to the point I can smell them and I can find them.
Oh, neat. I've heard of dogs being able to find fungi, but not people.
There's a certain, and it's a tree with the exudates, but there's literally one isolate that I didn't find, but someone sent it to me, and I guess my favorite story is I was literally procrastinating because I didn't want to go back to work. I mean, I was working, but I was listening to NPR and looking at these cultures, and I'm like, oh, there's nothing here. And then finally I found it, and it was a new species. Yeah, that was my favorite. Yeah, so don't procrastinate, but it doesn't always pay.
If you do find a new species.
Sometimes things happen.
It paid off.
So Jack Rogers recently passed away, and it would be interesting to get your perspective on Jack. We know him as a character, and I've been in the field with him and so forth, but say a little bit about Jack.
And we're going to record this because she's actually going to write a memorial for Jack for publication in Mycology. So this will be something she can look at and remember that she needs to do this. She's working on it.
Thank you so much. He was the most dedicated Charles was as well, but he was so dedicated. No matter what I did, he would stop what he's doing, help me for hours, and he was 100% advocate. He was also the department chair, and he would he just always stepped up and was like, "This is my student." Like, he's so proud of me, whether I deserved it or not. He's always very proud of me, and always very much promoted my work. Also terrifying, like in a good way. He has very high standards. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's why he's so.
There was a kind of gruffness to his voice, and
and his West Virginia accent that he never lost. Not to my ear anyway.
No, which is wild actually for living in Pullman since he was younger, but he's an amazing mentor, and I'm incredibly grateful that I that he took me on as a student and really impacted.
Did he tell the lab group, tell all of you stories all the time?
Oh my God, the the stories, the jokes, the it was wonderful. He was, and his patience. No matter what I did, he's a morning person. I'm not. Like I could throw him an abstract at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he'd be on his way. But he would just stop, read it, edit it with perfection, without saying anything. And I look back, I'm like, oh God, that wasn't so great. But like he was so patient and kind, and such a good mentor. And so I've tried to do the same for my students.
Yeah, and some of us knew Belle, his wife.
Oh, yeah.
She would come to meetings. Did she do things with the students and Jack, or not?
Yeah, she they invited us to their home several times. She had myself and my partner at the time, and the other lab members to their home. And I remember Belle, when I passed my comprehensive, she came over and brought me a plant, and super sweet. And I have been so she's very supportive. She's always kind of there, being supportive of Jack and his students. And I have been in touch with her a little bit since his passing, through a few.
Now, were there other students in the lab when you were there, or had he?
When I was there, it was towards the end. So Yuming Ju was a postdoc, and Mike Adams was the technician, and he only had one student after.
Okay, and Yu Ming had been his student, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because they developed that website that's got so many beautiful pictures of.
And I will tell you, it was so intimidating. They had, I would go into my microscope was in the herbarium, and they have a lab bench, and they would put papers out that they're working on, and like every day there's a new paper. I think he was publishing about 8 papers a year then. And every day I'd go in, because they would leave their papers there that they were working on. And it was very inspiring and intimidating.
So then.
Oh, so then what? So then I graduated with much stress. No, it was fine. Then I went to I was a postdoc at Oregon State University. I actually got a nice, funding was different at the time. I got a nice grant from the department, the DOE, for a postdoc, and that funded me for 3 years and then 6 years. And then I worked with Jeff Stone, who wonderful mycologist at Oregon State University, and we had a lot of similar interests in fungi. I worked in old growth forests. It was amazing. And forest pathology.
Did you work on endophytes?
I did not. I worked on it was, at the time, it was Phaeocryptus gaumannii. It's been renamed. But it was causing a huge problem on Douglas fir, which is the corn of Oregon. And so we worked on the histology, and I worked on a lot of parameters of why the disease was so problematic.
Yeah, we know Jeff as being somebody who works with endophytes, was
Yes.
why I asked you that, but also editor of Mycology.
Yeah.
Was he at the time you were?
He was amazing. I know he dedicated so much time with MSA. I'll say that I when I worked with him, he was so, I think he helped move it to Ellen Press. I think he was really very, 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 very dedicated to MSA, and very proud of, well, he's very humble. But I know he dedicates so much time for Mycology.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember, but there may not have been an editorial system at the time. that you would
Yeah,
put your
well,
paper.
I think that was part of the period. You know, the New York Botanical Garden had the journal, and then there was the move of the journal to
Have bigger
Allen
pages.
Press and the various changes. So there was a lot going on at that point in the society, and you know, everybody was digging in and trying to make sure that the journal was successful and that it moved forward and so forth. And he was very much a part of that.
I know he dedicated a lot of his time and took that very seriously. Yeah, it was nice to see.
So you were there a year, 2 years?
Oh,
5 years. Oh gosh, I had no idea.
I know. And part of it, yeah, because I got one series of funding and then we got another. Part of it was because of my just personal relationship. My better half had moved for me all over the country, so he got a good job, and so I chose to stay there. You know, so you know.
Yeah, as long as you could.
Yeah, just give and take.
But then ultimately you moved.
Then I ultimately moved. I got a wonderful job at Clemson University, and I've been there 15 years.
Time flies.
I know. It's a I never thought. I read the job description. I was like, oh, it's perfect for it. I'd interviewed a bunch of places. I was like, it's a good fit. And it's at the time Clemson's an R2, which is a lesser. It was a perfect fit for me. The job description was like, oh my God, that's perfect. I actually really love the southeastern part of the United States. I loved being in Athens. I loved it, so I was very comfortable going back to South Carolina. The job fit perfectly, and I love the quality of life in South Carolina. You can have a very nice quality of life on a professor's salary, which is not, you can't do that everywhere. So, which is important, right?
Yeah.
And you have a place out in the country and dogs. And
yes. I live in a house I'm so proud of. I bought a house on 10 acres. By myself, and it backs up to about 150 150 acres. But just buying a nice home by myself was a big deal for me.
So you teach a lot.
I teach a ton.
What do you teach?
So I teach introductory. Thank you. This is why Clemson was such a dream job for me. I teach introductory mycology. There's a lecture. I made the lab separate by my choice, and it's gotten huge. It fills up. It's 90 people. I have 2 sections of lab. It's as big as I want it to be. And then I also teach a class called Fungi in Civilization, which is building off of people like Charles Mims's Friends or Foes, or building off of other popular mycology courses, which is about 200 people now, 200 students. And I was completely given liberty to whatever I want to teach, I teach, which is is a dream. It's a dream. Yeah,
and you've got a sideline there that you've built up, the scums.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about scums.
Thank you. So I'm not a mushroom person per se, but I love fungi, and I love sharing my love of fungi with everybody. And now it's super easy, but fungi have not always been so popular. And so when I was at Pullman, I organized a mushroom club, which is now defunct. But now, since I've been at in South Carolina, I've started the SCUMS, which is the South Carolina Upstate Mycological Society, which is like, you have to have a good acronym, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I've aligned with other nearby mushroom clubs, and it's a lot of work, but it's a pride of what I do. Even though I'm not a mushroom expert, I love bringing people together who love fungi, and I've truly harnessed such good friendships through that mushroom club. I can't even tell you. It's been really very fulfilling.
And you've been really effective at having very good speakers for them in all areas of mycology.
Yes, somehow once we got some, we got little momentum, and we also, pre-COVID, we shared speakers with the Mushroom Club of Georgia, and that would, we could share expenses like flights and all that, and that really preempted our ability to bring in people from around the country or, yeah.
Yeah, you have amazing speakers.
We do, yes, and that's just that's truly I just enjoy it so much, and the opportunities to interact with people is crazy, so crazily wonderful.
So at the end here, what would you like to say to people?
Oh my God. The mycological world is wonderful, and we have the best. I'm going to speak to MSA, I guess. We have the best community in the world. We're so supportive, and I'm very inarticulate about this. Oh my God. But I'm so grateful for being part of MSA, and I'm very grateful I was introduced to it very long time ago.
No, we're happy to have you as our president.
Yeah. And you have a great year ahead of you. It'll be great.
We'll offer lots of suggestions.
I'm sure.
Need them or not.
So,
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.